If I had to start over in 2026 with no shortcuts, no inside deals, and no guarantees, I wouldn't chase trends and I wouldn't try to look smart. I would do exactly what I tell my grandchildren to do: build slowly, own real pieces of the global economy, and let time and discipline do the heavy lifting. People want complicated answers because simple ones feel boring. But boring is how wealth survives. Boring is how families stay wealthy across generations. The market doesn't reward excitement. It rewards patience, ownership, and restraint. I've spent my life building things that last, not things that spike and disappear, but businesses that serve real people, generate real cash, and survive real crises. Investing should be no different. In 2026, the world feels unstable to a lot of people. Technology is moving fast. Politics are noisy. Markets swing harder than they used to. That makes people think they need clever strategies. They don't. They need strong foundations. If you get the foundation right, the rest takes care of itself. When you invest for your grandchildren, you don't think in months or years. You think in decades. You think about recessions they haven't seen yet, bubbles they don't know are coming, and opportunities that don't exist today. That kind of thinking forces clarity. It strips away speculation and leaves only what truly matters. If I had to reduce everything down to just 3 ETFs to start over in 2026, they would represent 3 ideas that have never failed over time. Own the productive economy, own innovation responsibly, and protect purchasing power against a world that constantly devalues money. The first thing I would teach my grandchildren is that owning the market is better than trying to beat it. The global economy grows because people wake up every day, go to work, build products, provide services, and solve problems. You don't need to know which company will win next year if you own them all. The obsession with picking winners is mostly ego. The market doesn't care about your ego. Broad ownership beats cleverness, especially for someone starting fresh. That's why the first ETF I would recommend is one that represents the total U.S. stock market, not a narrow slice, not a theme, the entire engine. Thousands of companies across every sector adjusting automatically as businesses rise and fall. This is capitalism distilled into one instrument. Some companies will fail, others will dominate. You don't need to predict which is which. The market does that for you. Over time, this approach has crushed most active strategies because it removes human error from the equation. People underestimate how powerful this is. They look at a total market ETF and say it's too simple. That's exactly the point. Simplicity scales. Simplicity survives mistakes. Simplicity lets you sleep at night when markets fall because you know you own the economy, not a fragile idea. If my grandchildren invested consistently into the total market from a young age, reinvested dividends, ignored headlines, and stayed disciplined, they wouldn't need brilliance. They'd need time. And time is the greatest advantage young investors have. The second ETF I would recommend is one that represents global innovation, but with structure and discipline. Innovation drives growth, but uncontrolled speculation destroys capital. In every generation, there's a new frontier. Railroads, electricity, computers, the internet, artificial intelligence. Innovation always wins, but not every innovator does. That's the trap people fall into. They confuse the inevitability of progress with certainty of profits. A technology-focused ETF that tracks the largest, most profitable, most established innovators gives exposure to progress without betting on fragile startups or unproven ideas. These are companies with scale, cash flow, and pricing power. They invest billions in research, acquire competitors, and shape how the world works. They're not hype-driven. They're infrastructure-level businesses. In 2026, technology isn't optional. It's embedded into everything. Owning it responsibly is not speculation, it's realism. I wouldn't tell my grandchildren to chase the newest tech story. I'd tell them to own the companies that already survive multiple cycles and still dominate. Companies that make money even when growth slows. Comp A&Es that adapt instead of collapse. This kind of ETF gives you exposure to innovation while filtering out weakness over time. As companies fall behind, they're removed. As leaders emerge, they're added. Again, discipline replaces prediction. The third ETF I would recommend might surprise people, but it's the one that protects everything else. Inflation is silent theft. It doesn't announce itself loudly. It just slowly reduces what your money can buy. People who ignore this lose purchasing power even when they think they're doing fine. In 2026, governments are deeply in debt, currencies are constantly pressured, and financial systems are stretched. Pretending this doesn't matter is irresponsible. That's why I would include an ETF that provides exposure to real assets or inflation-resistant instruments, such as Treasury inflation-protected securities or broad commodity-linked exposure. This isn't about getting rich. This is about staying whole. Wealth that isn't protected eventually disappears. People think protection is pessimism. It's not. It's maturity. When you combine these three ETFs, you're not trying to win a single year. You're building a structure that can survive many. You own growth, innovation, and protection. You're diversified across industries, technologies, and economic conditions. You're not dependent on perfect timing or perfect judgment. You're dependent on discipline and consistency. Here's the part most people get wrong. The ETFs don't make you wealthy. Your behavior does. You have to invest regularly, especially when it feels uncomfortable. You have to stay invested when markets fall and headlines scream disaster. You have to resist the urge to tinker, trade, and chase whatever is popular this month. The biggest enemy of returns is not the market, it's the investor. I would tell my grandchildren that there will be moments when everyone around them sounds smarter. Someone will always claim they've found the next big thing. Someone will always say the system is broken. Someone will always predict collapse. Ignore them. The economy doesn't move in straight lines, but it moves forward over time. Betting against human progress has been a losing strategy for centuries. Starting over in 2026 doesn't require courage. It requires humility, accepting that you don't need to be extraordinary to succeed, accepting that boring consistency beats dramatic moves, accepting that wealth is built quietly, not loudly. I've seen fortunes made and lost. The ones that last are built on patience and principles, not excitement. If my grandchildren ask me how often to check their portfolio, I'd tell them once or twice a year. If they ask when to sell, I tell them when their goals change, not when the market panics. If they ask how to get rich faster, I tell them that's the wrong question. The right question is how to stay wealthy once you have something. People love complexity because it makes them feel in control. Real control comes from reducing mistakes. These three ETFs do exactly that. They remove ego, reduce friction, and align you with forces larger than any individual investor. Economic growth, technological progress, capital preservation. I didn't build success by chasing every opportunity. I built it by saying no far more often than yes. Investing is the same. You don't need dozens of positions. You need a few that you understand deeply and trust completely. Starting over in 2026 doesn't mean starting from scratch mentally. The rules haven't changed. The noise has just gotten louder. If you build your foundation right, the rest becomes easier. You stop reacting. You start thinking long term. You stop fearing downturns and start seeing them as part of the process. That's how generational wealth is built, not by brilliance, by discipline passed down over time. If you want excitement, the market will happily give it to you. If you want freedom, stability, and legacy, keep it simple, stay patient, and let ownership do the work. That's what I'd tell my grandchildren. And that's exactly what I'd do myself if I had to start over tomorrow.